Hello viewers, warm greetings of the day. I'm Dr. Sharanjeet, Professor of Law at Rajiv Gandhi National University of Law, Punjab. Today's academic journey shall trace the nature, functions and theories of torts. Dear viewers, in order to understand the nature of tort, it becomes imperative to rely on some of the definitions of tort as given from time to time. Tort as defined under section 2M of the Indian Limitation Act 1963 is a civil wrong which is not exclusively the breach of a contract or the breach of trust. The nature of a tort can also be deciphered from the definition of tort given by Sir Salmond. Salmond has defined tort as a civil wrong which is redressable by an action for unliquidated damages and which is other than a mere breach of contract or a breach of trust. Viewers, we can better understand the nature of tort by pondering upon its important elements. First, tort belongs to the category of civil wrongs. Second, tort is a wrong other than a breach of contract or a breach of trust. Third, under the tort law, a suit is filed for the recovery of unliquidated damages. Fourthly, liability under the tort law arises by the operation of law and not by the consent of any particular person. Now we shall ponder upon the mental element in tortious liability. Dear viewers, unlike crime, where mens rea is an essential element of crime, motive is not generally relevant in tort cases because the ultimate object of law of torts is redressal of wrong caused to the plaintiff through the damages to be paid by the defendant. In tort cases, it is generally immaterial whether the defendant did the wrongful act intentionally, unintentionally or maliciously, because the main consideration before the court in deciding these cases is to see whether the act complained of by the plaintiff constitutes violation of any of his legal right. If so, the plaintiff will succeed and recover damages from the defendant. As far as liability under the law of torts is concerned, one view which was propounded by Holmes in the beginning was based on fault for the purpose of determining liability. A person would be held liable only if he was at fault. But with the passage of time, as the welfare state emerged, the fault theory gave way to the principle of strict liability, and now, under certain circumstances, a person may be held liable even though he was not negligent. Moving further with regards to the nature of tort, throughout the world, tort is considered as a civil wrong which is very different from a criminal offence. Why do we consider tort as different from a criminal wrong is primarily due to the fact that in case of a crime, the criminal proceedings are instituted by the state against the accused because it is felt that a crime is a wrong not only against an individual but against the whole state, and as a result, the state is very much interested in prosecuting and punishing the wrongdoer. The accused on conviction is punished and also fined for the offence committed by him or her. Whereas, in cases of a civil wrong like a tort, it is redressable by an action for unliquidated damages. In this regard, it is important to note that some acts may constitute a crime as well as a tort. In such circumstances, the plaintiff may bring a civil action against the defendant for damages, or he may institute criminal proceedings against the wrongdoer and get him punished by the order of the court. Dear viewers, a tort is also considered to be different from the breach of a contract due to various reasons. First and most importantly, a tort involves the violation of a right in rem, whereas in case of a breach of contract, the right in personam is violated. Furthermore, in case of a contract, the liability of the parties arises due to the existence of contractual relations between them, referred to as privity of contract between the parties, whereas in case of a tort, the liability is imposed by the law itself. So we can say that in case of a contract, there is a privity of contract and each party owes a duty only towards the other contracting party. However, this is not so in case of the tort law. With regards to the liability under the law of torts, the damages are always unliquidated, whereas in case of a breach of contract, the damages are predetermined by the parties, hence liquidated in nature. Furthermore, in case of a breach of contract, the aggrieved party can also claim damages for loss arising from special circumstances relating to them, provided the other party knew about it before the breach of contract occurred. In breach of contract, the main remedy is specific performance of the contract, and the other remedies available are penalty, liquidated damages and injunction. Whereas in tort, the main remedy is damages. Also, the motive in certain torts is relevant, whereas in a contract, the motive is irrelevant. Vicarious liability is applicable in torts. In contracts, it is applicable in certain exceptional cases only. Another interesting difference between the two lies in the fact that some torts can also fall in the category of crimes such as defamation, deceit, malicious prosecution, public nuisance, whereas a breach of contract can never be a crime, it shall always be a civil wrong. Now, we shall discuss the difference between a tort and a breach of trust. Dear viewers, the concept of trust originated from the English Chancery courts, whereas the source of origin of tort is the English common law. In case of a breach of trust, the beneficiary can sue the trustee for damages. However, the quantum of damages is predetermined and the beneficiary cannot recover more than the previously decided amount. Whereas in tort, the damages are always unliquidated depending upon the actual harm suffered. Further, the misappropriation of trust property generally does not give rise to cause of damages, in law of torts, because the courts consider such violation of duty as most undesirable and treat it as a criminal act punishable under Section 406 of the Indian Penal Code. And the definition of the breach of trust is also contained in Section 405 of the Indian Penal Code. Now, moving forward, we shall differentiate between a tort and a quasi-contractual obligation. As we all know that a quasi-contract has been discussed in Chapter 5 of the Indian Contract Act 1872. Quasi-contracts refers to certain relations resembling those of a contract but not strictly arising out of a contract between the parties. The only common element in a quasi-contract and a tort is that the duty in each case is imposed by the law. The main difference between the two lies in the fact that the duty in case of a quasi-contract is always to be performed by a particular person, that is, the person who has received an unjust monetary benefit, whereas under the law of tort, the duty is imposed towards the general public. Every tort involves a breach of duty primarily fixed by law, but it is not so in case of a quasi-contract. Moving forward, the next important question that we need to discuss and answer is whether it is the law of tort or torts. Dear viewers, it is very interesting to note that writers and authorities on tort have expressed different views as regards the correct nomenclature of this very important branch of law. Some jurists consider it as a law of tort, whereas others call it as law of torts. According to Salmond, it should be called the law of torts and not the law of tort. Salmond advanced the pigeonhole theory and argued that there is no general principle of liability, and if the plaintiff can place his wrong under any one of the nominated torts, he can succeed and not otherwise. To put this in simple terms, according to Salmond, different words have been labelled in pigeonholes and there is no scope for any other wrong to be considered as a tort beyond those which are already so labelled. Thus, in other words, the category of torts has already been closed and no wrong other than those labelled can be treated as torts. Whereas Dr. Winfield holds that it is correct to caption this branch of law as law of tort and not law of torts, because every wrongful act for which there is no justification or excuse is to be treated as a tort. Thus, according to him, the category of tort never closes and there is always a scope for including new torts in this branch of law if it fits in the principles stated above. Now, we shall try to answer whether all civil injuries are tort or not. Dear viewers, it is important to note that although a tort is essentially a civil injury. However, all civil injuries are not torts. It falls under the category of a tort only when it causes harm to a specific person. For instance, where a person wrongfully obstructs a public road, it is for the administration and the government to take action against the wrongdoer. However, if a private individual also suffers some special damage on account of such obstruction, he can sue the wrongdoer for damages. After discussing the nature of tort and how tort is different from a breach of contract or a breach of trust or a crime, now we shall focus on the function of the law of torts. Firstly and most importantly, the law of torts provides relief from wrongful acts of others through monetary compensation. The quantum of compensation depends upon the actual harm suffered. As discussed previously, the law of torts gives right in rem. Hence, it gives monetary relief to the plaintiff in the form of unliquidated damages depending upon the actual financial loss suffered by him or her due to the tort. The damages can be general, special, nominal, compensatory, or prospective in nature. The courts may provide the following remedies like unliquidated damages, injunction, specific restitution, and declaration of a right. While granting compensation in accident cases covered under the law of torts, the quantum of compensation should be based on the principle of restitutio in integrum, which means that the plaintiff who is entitled to damages should, as nearly as possible, get that sum of money which would put him in a position as he would have been if he had not suffered the wrong. Secondly, in the absence of the law of torts, it would become very difficult to fix liability in case of a wrong takes place between parties who are not known to each other. Without any privity of contract between the parties, one person may become liable to compensate the other in case he commits a tort against the other person. This is a very important function of the law of torts. It helps the aggrieved person to take recourse to a civil action against the wrong done to him or her. And in the absence of this branch of law, the aggrieved party would have technically no legal recourse. Injunction is an order issued by a court directing the party to refrain from doing a wrongful act which is likely to cause harm or injury to the plaintiff. The provisions relating to the grant of injunction are contained in sections 36 to 42 of the Specific Relief Act 1963. Similarly, the procedure for grant of temporary or interim injunction is governed by the Code of Civil Procedure 1908. The injunction can be perpetual, temporary, mandatory, or prohibitory in nature. It is important to note that injunction is generally granted by the court under three circumstances, namely, first, against continuance of an injury, second, to prevent its recurrence, and last, preventing an injury which is being caused or likely to be caused. This branch of law helps in maintaining social order as it penalizes conduct that is socially unacceptable and harmful in nature. It is important to note that under the law of torts, various important concepts are available. For instance, strict liability, vicarious liability, liability for injury caused by animals, liability for defective products, liability of occupier for dangerous land and premises, inclusion of specific torts like assault and battery, false imprisonment, trespass to land, trespass to goods and conversion, injurious falsehood and passing of actions, deceit, negligent statements, nuisance, negligence, defamation, and malicious prosecution. Thus, through this we can gauge that the law of torts helps in maintaining social order by protecting the interests of the people from socially unacceptable and harmful conduct of other persons. This in turn helps in preservation of certain fundamental values in the society. The next important function of this branch of law is with regards to imposing a liability for breach of a duty. The liability for breach of duty may arise in the case of the following: dangerous premises or buildings, dangerous chattels, rules of strict liability, liability for injury done by animals, dangerous animals, liability arising under the Motor Vehicle Act 1988, or the liability arising under the consumer protection laws. Next is that it becomes important to note that the rule of strict liability enshrined in Rayland versus Fletcher way back in the year 1868 said that men perform many activities which are dangerous to the person and property of others. The law clearly states that the doers of such activities have to compensate for the damage caused irrespective of any carelessness or motive on their part. As per this rule of absolute liability, the plaintiff is not required to prove negligence, lack of care, or wrongful intention on the part of the defendant. Dear viewers, it is important to note that where there is a privity of contract between the parties, there are two classes in which the remedy for a breach of duty arising out of the contract is an action in tort, namely where the damage is caused by negligence or by fraud. Thus, for negligence or unskillfulness, a party to the contract may be liable in tort as well as under the contractual obligations. In this regard, it is important to note that a breach of contract between the contracting parties will not enable a stranger to sue one of the parties for injuries done to him through the breach. In order to understand the nature of tort, it becomes highly imperative to throw some light on the theories of tort. So, how does the tortious liability arise? An answer to this can be found with the help of two prominent theories dealing with the liability under torts. The two competing theories look at tortious liability from different perspectives. According to one theory on the subject, there is a general principle that all the wrongs are actionable as tort unless there is any legal justification, whereas the other theory makes it out that there is no general principle of liability as such, but only a definite number of torts falls under this arena. Thus, in this regard, we have two competing theories. The first theory was given by Dr. Jens Salmond. Dr. Salmond had said, just as criminal law consists of a body of rules establishing specific offences, so the law of torts consists of a body of rules establishing specific injuries. He said that the law of torts consists of a list of acts and omissions which in certain conditions were actionable. This whole theory was called the pigeonhole theory. Salmond further stated that whether I am prosecuted for an alleged offence or sued for an alleged tort, it is for my adversary to prove that the case falls within some specific and established rule of liability and not for me to defend myself by proving that it is within some specific and established rule of justification or excuse. In the case of Babu Thakur versus Subhanshi, it was observed by the court that no right of action for damage at large lies at law. It is necessary for the plaintiff in every case to bring himself within the four corners of some recognized head of tort. Judges cannot legislate and cannot invent new heads of injury. That is the prerogative of the legislature. Through this judgment, the court had also supported Salmond's theory and held that in spite of loss faced by the plaintiff, he cannot be compensated because the claim demanded by him does not come under any head shown by the common law. Moving ahead, the second theory was founded by Winfield. Winfield was of the view that all injuries done to another person are torts unless there is some justification recognized by the law. Winfield was of the view that the courts can create new torts and the law of torts is growing. To support this theory, Lord Mansfield in 1760 referred to the action upon the case of as a liberal action, and Lord Cowden said in 1962, torts are infinitely various, not limited or codified. Interestingly, the Indian judiciary has also shown a favor towards this theory. In the case of M.C. Mehta versus Union of India, the court observed, we have to evolve new principles and lay down new norms which will adequately deal with new problems which arise in a highly industrialized economy. We cannot allow our judicial thinking to be constrained by reference to the law as it prevails in England. We are certainly prepared to receive light from whatever source it comes, but we have to build our own jurisprudence. It is important to note that in this landmark judgment, the Supreme Court of India established the concept of absolute liability in place of strict liability. Moving ahead, in the case of Lala Panna Lal versus Kasturi Chand Ramji, it was pointed out that there is nothing like exhaustive classification of courts beyond which a court should not proceed. The new invasion of rights devised by humans might give rise to new classes of tort, and in that way, malicious house search may also constitute such a new tort. On the whole, if we were asked to express our preference between two theories in the light of recent decisions of the competent courts, we will have to choose the broader theory of liability. The American Restatement of Law of Torts, Volume 1, also reiterates that the entire history of the development of tort law shows a continuous tendency to recognize as worthy of legal protection interests which previously were not protected at all. So, in the end, I would like to conclude with the definition of torts as suggested by Dr. Winfield. According to him, tortious liability, that is, liability in tort, arises from the breach of duty primarily fixed by the law, such duties towards a person generally, and its breach is redressable by an action for unliquidated damages. Thank you.